first time Lila learned the power of silence disguised as words, she was 43 and exhausted from trying to keep the peace with people who didn't deserve it. For most of her life, she'd been the type to shrink during conflict, the nice one, the one who apologized first, even when she wasn't wrong. But years of enduring criticism, manipulation, and veiled insults had hardened something inside her. It wasn't anger, exactly. It was clarity. She realized that toxic people didn't crave understanding. They craved control. And the only way to win with them wasn't to fight louder. It was to speak smarter. The first test came at work. Her supervisor, a man who liked to flaunt his authority, loved to undermine her in meetings. "Lila," he said one afternoon, smirking, "you always take a bit longer to catch on, don't you?" The room chuckled politely. Once she would have laughed it off. But that day, she leaned back in her chair and said calmly, "That's possible. I like to make sure I understand things thoroughly before speaking." The laughter died. Her tone was mild, but her words landed with precision. The supervisor blinked, unsure how to respond. She hadn't insulted him. She'd simply refused to play his game. That was the first clever comeback she learned. Deflect with composure. It doesn't feed their ego, but it starves their power. The second came from her sister, Dana, the family's chronic critic. Dana had a talent for dressing insults as concern. "You've put on a little weight," she said during a holiday dinner, voice sweet as sugar. "Are you okay? I'm just worried about your health." Lila smiled without looking up from her plate. "Thanks for caring," she said softly. "But my body's doing exactly what it needs to, and I'm proud of it." The table went silent. Dana's smile froze, and she turned her attention elsewhere. That was the second comeback, mirror confidence where they expect insecurity. Toxic people thrive on finding weakness. Nothing disarms them faster than pride in the very thing meant to shame. The third situation unfolded with her old friend, Marcy. They'd known each other for years, but lately, Marcy's conversations had turned into competitions. Who had more stress, more drama, more pain? When Lila mentioned a tough week at work, Marcy scoffed. "You think that's bad? Try raising 2 kids while working full-time. You wouldn't last a day." For a moment, Lila almost explained herself, almost apologized for feeling tired. Then she caught herself and simply replied, "You might be right. We're dealing with different challenges." No defensiveness, no argument, just acknowledgement. Marcy frowned, expecting more, but Lila had already moved on. That was the third comeback. Agree without surrendering. It ends the argument before it begins, leaving the other person stranded with their own bitterness. The fourth test came from her ex-husband. Even years after the divorce, he still found ways to needle her under the guise of friendly conversation. When he criticized her for not being more flexible with their grown daughter's schedule, she replied evenly, "You might be right, but I'd rather be consistent than convenient." He went quiet, his expression unreadable. That one stung because it exposed truth without aggression. That was the fourth comeback. Respond with boundaries disguised as reason. Toxic people rarely know what to do with calm certainty. And then there was the fifth, the hardest one, the one that took her the longest to master. It happened one afternoon when she ran into an old coworker who had once made her life miserable. The woman smiled too widely and said, "Oh, Lila, I heard you left your last job. Couldn't handle the pressure again?" Old Lila would have explained, defended, justified. But this version simply looked at her and said, "I'm really happy with where I am now. Thanks for asking." Then she smiled, not with sarcasm, but with genuine peace, and walked away. That was the fifth and most powerful comeback. Refuse to engage at all. Sometimes the smartest reply is the one that doesn't feed the fire. That night, as Leela sat by her window with a cup of tea, she thought about how long it had taken her to learn these quiet victories. She used to think power came from loud words or sharp wit, but it wasn't that at all. It was restraint, the grace to walk away with your dignity intact while the other person drowned in their own venom. The truth was, toxic people couldn't survive in an atmosphere of peace. They needed chaos to breathe, drama to feed on. When you gave them calm instead of reaction, it suffocated their control. Lila smiled to herself, feeling the warmth of quiet strength settle in her chest. She hadn't just learned clever comebacks, she'd learned self-respect disguised as conversation. And that, she realized, was the ultimate silence. Not the absence of words, but the presence of power. that no insult could touch.